Imagine being taken unconscious to a hospital, and while unconscious, being given drugs that could be lethal to you. Then when you complain about it, you have government thugs unleashed on you. That's exactly what happened recently to one of our viewers, and today we're going to tell his story.
Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. It's Rob, and I'm one of the Freeman people.
It's the Freeman people.
Earlier this year, another viewer of the channel named Rob had an absolutely miserable experience at his local hospital, followed by a police report that contradicted itself, and culminating in what looks, on the surface at least, to be an arrest made in retaliation for a citizen filing grievances against a person holding a public office. He sent us his video and we spoke on the phone for a while, and today I'll play clips from both. Head over to Rob's channel to watch his full video. The link is in the description below. So Rob is from Wyoming, Michigan. I guess 2 state names leads to double the statism. Real tyrants seem to think it's okay to ignore people in their community whom they've been granted some illusion of authority over, especially when they hide behind the excuse of hurt feelings. And Wyoming, Michigan seems to have some thin-skinned tyrants running the show. Our friend Rob is an asthma sufferer. Now, this isn't your run-of-the-mill, use your inhaler and you're fine type asthma. Here's how he described it to me on the phone.
I have really bad asthma. Had it all my life. Intubated more times than I can count. I arrived at the emergency room twice with no vital signs at all.
Rob had an awful asthma attack on May 13th of this year, and an even worse experience in the hospital following it.
I believe it was on May 13th. I had some symptoms of asthma, and I called 911, requested an ambulance. Lost consciousness while I was on the phone with 911. The paramedics arrived. They found me unconscious on my floor, began administering first aid. They cut all the clothes off my body, ultimately transported me to the hospital as naked as the day I was born.
This isn't Rob's first rodeo going to the hospital, and his family seems to know his condition better than the doctors involved.
That night, my sister came down to the hospital to check on my condition. She asked the doctors what medication they were using. Told her that they were using propofol, which is the medication that actually killed Michael Jackson. My sister told them to stop administering that immediately. They should know better. It's in my medical files to not use propofol. They claimed they couldn't find my medical file, but yet my discharge papers from the hospital advised me to follow up with my primary care physician by name. The following morning, my sister called to check on my condition. She asked if they had taken me out to propofol. They said they did, but I was trying to pull my tubes out, so they had to put me back on it. She reiterated, take him off it immediately. He has adverse reactions. It's in his medical files. So at that point, I think they started to realize they may be messed up, and they did ultimately take me off that medication, and that afternoon I started coming out of my medically induced coma. From my experience with the medication, I knew what it felt like to be on it and come out of the coma on that medication, and I knew instantly that I had been subjected to malpractice.
Ooh, malpractice. That's a big one. Malpractice would make anyone nervous to be in a place where they've been subjected to it. It's also a phrase that will send medical staff scrambling to corroborate a false story that helps them avoid it.
I knew I had been subjected to malpractice, and I didn't feel safe there, so I just simply wanted to leave. My problem was I didn't have clothes in my nightgown, and my butt hanging out and everything, and I went out to the nurse station and said, hey, what happened to my clothes? I just want to leave. And they, of course, quickly ushered me back in the room that I didn't want to be in, and they said they'd check on my clothes. Well, I didn't want to be in the room, so I went back out. I said, did you destroy my clothes? Is there someone from patient relations I can speak to? This happened about 2 or 3 times where they, ushered me back in the room where I didn't want to be, and they said they'd check on it. And I just kept going back out because I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to leave. And by about that 3rd time, it was real quick, they had brought in the brute squad to manhandle me.
I'm on the brute squad.
You are the brute squad.
Now, mind you, at this point, I'm wearing a bracelet on my wrist that the hospital put on my wrist that says fall risk. This is all within an hour of waking from a medically induced coma after nearly dying, being transported unconscious by ambulance to the hospital, and they sent in the brute squad to force me back into my room and grab me by the arm like I was their prisoner and force me back in the room.
At this point, his stay at the hospital seems less than voluntary, and understandably, our friend Rob wants to know the name of the guard who he feels assaulted him. Nobody on the floor would identify the security guard, and security was in the process of calling the police always a poor choice. Our friend has been a longtime watcher of James' channel, so he knows that calling the police only makes matters worse. But they were already called in, so Rob decided to file assault charges against the security guard. In retaliation, the hospital threatened to file assault charges back. And when Rob asked to get a copy of the security film from the floor he was on, they wanted to charge him the highest amount possible for the videos he was requesting. Typical tyrant move. If you want to gather evidence, even exculpatory evidence that would possibly exonerate you as a defendant, the tyrant does everything in their power to block you. Rob inspected the police report from this incident where he found contradictory statements by hospital staff.
Not only does the police report contradict itself, it also contradicts my medical records. For starters, the police report clearly states that claims that I was refusing to leave, as does the 911 call. They called the police and said I was refusing to leave. But at the same time, the police report also recognized that I didn't have proper clothing to leave, and even furthermore, it states that I agreed to leave once I had been properly medically discharged, which raises the question, is the hospital claiming I was refusing to leave before I had been properly medically discharged? And how is that even possible? So that raised some pretty big questions right there that I wanted to address with the city prosecutor, not to mention the fact that while the police report is claiming I was refusing to leave, the hospital records that I requested clearly indicate on multiple occasions that I was demanding to leave.
After this, Rob reached out to the city attorney, Heather Chapman, about both his assault complaint and the false police report complaint. She refused to call him back, and after sending emails to her and a few attempts to reach her directly, he finally got through to her. He's planning on using the call in a follow-up video on his channel soon, but he shared the call with me over the phone to include in this video. But as a copy of a copy of a copy is kind of hard to hear, let me summarize it a bit. In the call to Heather Chapman, he questioned the city attorney about whether she understood the basis of his false police report complaint. She immediately sidestepped the question, instead asking if he ever got a copy of the actual police report or the security videos from the hospital. She did this as a way to redirect the conversation. Rob tells her he got a copy of the report, but not the video, because as I mentioned earlier, the hospital is charging him an amount that puts it out of reach for him currently. He then reminds her she didn't answer his first question, to which she then provides another redirect, asking if the hospital offered forms to help him offset the cost. He tells her they didn't, again reminds her she didn't answer his first question. After that, she tells Rob the real reason she hasn't gotten back to him.
The last time we talked, you told me that you were recording me after we got done talking, so I'm not going to talk about how I...
Ma'am, you're a government agent. You have no expectation of privacy. You're performing your public... You're neglecting to perform your public duties, and that's what I'm documenting.
People who take their salary out of taxpayers' bank accounts really take issue with being recorded. I wonder why that is. She goes on to tell him she disagrees with him that the security guard assaulted him. She hadn't reviewed security video, just relied on witness statements. And she ignored the false police report claims Rob brought up. He tried again to reach Heather Chapman, both via email and phone calls, but she refused to continue communicating with him. So he reached out to the person in charge of city employees, the city manager. So this takes us to Rob's original video, wherein he plays for us all the voicemails he left with the city manager's office and the threatening phone calls he received from the local police as well. The city manager is too self-important to take calls himself, so he delegates that to an assistant. All of Rob's voicemails are on the video on his channel. I'm going to start with the first one now.
Jennifer Stowell is out of the office. Please leave a message at the tone. When finished, you may hang up or press pound for additional options.
You're not real big on answering your phone, are you? My name's Rob. I have some questions and concerns. If you could return my call, my number's... I appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks.
See, here's where Rob made a glaring mistake. Jennifer Stowell is merely the assistant to the city manager. Everyone who's watched any white-collar, office-based reality TV show knows the assistant to title is merely ornamental. So this person is incapable of doing anything and should clearly not be on the taxpayer's payroll. Yay, government bloat! All jokes aside though, Rob started his voicemail with a criticism of Jennifer Stowell. This begs the question, does criticism give a public servant the right to not take a citizen's phone call, especially if that's their main job? This takes me to a recent county commission meeting I attended and spoke at during public comment. I was frustrated with the actions of our clerk here in Torrance County and compared it to a private business. If a private business acts in a way the consumer doesn't like, they can go elsewhere. But when you have people in perceived positions of power who decide to ignore their constituency, you can't take your business elsewhere. Anyway, then he received calls from the Deputy Public Safety Chief, or as Rob refers to him as the Feelings Police Chief, Kip Snyder.
Stay home and eat all the freaking chips, Kip.
Hi, Kip. This is Rob speaking on a recorded line.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. Listen, keep calling City Hall, man. You gotta stop.
I don't have to stop.
You're gonna get criminally charged if you continue to call and threaten and harass.
I'm not threatening to harass. I'm actually calling to voice my grievances against the government, which I have a right to do. So what will I be charged with?
Listen, that's not true. There is a certain point where it's unlawful because...
At what point? Explain to me at what point.
When the prosecutor decides, and he said it's very close. So I'm just trying to warn you.
Oh, it's very close. How? No, at what point does it become a problem? Explain to me. And remember, you're being recorded.
I'm quite aware of that. When it becomes harassing...
Oh, I'm not harassing, though. I'm simply asking for them to return my calls because I have concerns. How is that harassing?
You've gotten your answers and your return calls.
I have not gotten return calls. I have not gotten answers. I have not. I've actually recorded everything, so you can say that all you want.
Robert, we just have the documentation of your communications with everybody in the city.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Then why aren't they returning my calls? Because they know I'm right. Because they have actual concerns that are legitimate, and they're not returning my calls. Why? Because they know I'm right. So, you dude. I'm going to continue to call until I get a response. I'm not threatening. I'm not harassing. I'm actually trying to air my grievances. I'm trying to actually get an understanding of why the city is refusing to respond to my concerns. They're legitimate concerns, dude. So if you want to arrest me for raising legitimate concerns, it's going to look horrible for the city. It's going to be a huge lawsuit.
Yeah, okay. I can understand that this isn't going anywhere, and I suggest using that language with me is not really a good idea.
I don't care. I don't care. You using your language with me is not a good idea either. Threatening to arrest me for contacting City Hall because I have concerns is not gonna. It's not gonna go over very well, dude.
You're not listening.
You're not listening. You're not listening. Who's the servant here? Who's the public servant here? Huh, Kip?
Are you gonna stop, Robert?
No, I'm not. I'm going to continue to call until I can get some response. I need a response.
Very good, Mr. Homrich. Have a great day, sir.
I love how when weak-minded people get backed into a corner in a debate or argument, they'll say, "You're not listening." Kip flexes for Rob by telling him he's going to be arrested for calling City Hall to get answers from his civil servants, yet they're too thin-skinned to take criticism. So that's evidently harassment. And also, how do you define a word by using the same word you're trying to define? Saying harassing phone calls are harassing because of harassment shows why this genius ended up in law enforcement to begin with. Kip suggested that Rob was breaking a city ordinance against, quote, unwanted phone calls. So I looked through the city of Wyoming's ordinances to find what he was referring to. There were a couple of ordinances that didn't apply, but the ordinance that seemed to cover what Kip is claiming Rob broke by making calls to the city hall to get answers from a tyrannical assistant to the city manager, that would be found at section 50-63, harassing communication. It shall be unlawful for any person by the use of a telephone to do or perform any of the following. 1. Disturb the peace, quiet, or privacy of any person or family by repeated and continued calls intended to harass or disturb the person or family to whom the calls are made. So point 1 here is the only one that Rob might have been breaking here. But the key phrase in this ordinance is, quote, intended to harass. The Michigan Penal Code defines the word harass in Chapter 750, Section 411H-C. It says, harassment means conduct directed toward a victim that includes but is not limited to repeated or continuing unconsented contact that would cause a reasonable individual to suffer emotional distress, and that actually causes the victim to suffer emotional distress. This seems to be what Officer Stay Home and Eat All the Chips Kip was referring to. However, the Penal Code continues, harassment does not include constitutionally protected activity or conduct that serves a legitimate purpose. And while we're here in section 411H, we'll look at point B, which defines emotional distress. That means the significant mental suffering or distress that may, but does not necessarily require medical or other professional treatment or counseling. If Mr. Holt's assistant to the city manager can't cope with people calling to levy complaints against city employees, perhaps frying burgers at McDonald's will cause her less emotional distress. That said, let's go back to the harassment code. The way our manufactured freedom here in the United States is structured, a city ordinance cannot supersede state statute. So that last line can and should clear Mr. Homrick of any wrongdoing by calling City Hall to discuss his complaints against the city attorney. He was exercising a constitutionally protected activity while serving a legitimate purpose. It seems the city of Wyoming is using its brute squad to intimidate citizens and strip them of their constitutionally protected rights. My favorite highlight of Rob's video comes about 23 minutes in, after he discusses this phone call of intimidation from Kippy. Note the times of the two phone calls I'll highlight, and Rob's awesome shout out to Kip.
Kip Snyder's phone call was clearly nothing more than his own hypocritical attempt to threaten and harass me and intimidate me into not exercising my First Amendment rights any further. Well, Kip, how's that working out for you?
You have reached the voicemail of Jennifer Stowell, Administrative Assistant to the City Manager for the City of Wyoming.
Looks like Rob hung up with Kip and called Jennifer right away. That's awesome. So in our interview, Rob informed me that he was, in fact, arrested by the City of Wyoming Police Department after he filed formal complaints against the city attorney and Chief Kippy. It seems they'd rather just pay out a lawsuit against them than listen to their citizens.
Yeah, they decided to arrest me because I was complaining about their crappy service. So basically, petitioning government for a redress of grievances is now a crime.
Well, Michigan, I hope you're enjoying your perceived freedom while these tyrants in charge weaponize law enforcement against you. But at least if this goes to trial, Rob will have the luxury of taking this through to the discovery process. And that won't look good for the city of Wyoming. But I'm going to let him get more into that on his follow-up video that he has planned soon. Head on over to his channel and subscribe so that you don't miss that update video. But what are your thoughts, Freeman people? Leave them in the comments below, and please, the contact info for all involved is in the description and a pinned comment below. I'm sure the city would love to hear from you. But make sure you don't offend the assistant to the city manager. Thanks for taking action against tyranny. Here's a couple of videos you may have missed, and while you're at it, check out the Freeman People merch.